My name is Alara Vance. For most of my life, that name has felt like a borrowed coat, one stitched from fabrics I didn't choose and tailored for a person I never quite managed to become. I grew up in Port Blossom, a city that clings to the coast like a barnacle to a ship's hull, beautiful, old, and stubbornly resistant to change. Our family, the Vances, are part of the city's bedrock. My father, Arthur Vance, built his name on foundations of concrete and steel with Vance Holdings, the most respected property development firm in the region. My mother, Eleanor, built her own empire on social currency, a far more volatile but equally formidable market. I was the youngest, the quiet one, the child who preferred the silent company of books and the humming glow of a computer screen to the boisterous, sun-drenched world of regattas and garden parties my family inhabited. My brother, Julian, was the heir apparent, groomed from birth to take over the family business. He wore his ambition like a well-tailored suit. My sister, Serafina, was the family's ornament, her life a curated collection of European travels, designer labels, and strategic friendships. And then there was me, Alara, the daydreamer, the one who did something with computers. My path was not paved with the solid certainty of real estate or the glittering appeal of high society. It was a winding, digital thread that I followed into a world my family neither understood nor valued. For years, I let them believe I was drifting, a rudderless ship in the vast ocean of life, while in the quiet solitude of my small apartment, I was charting a new continent. I was building Etheria, a company born from a simple idea that technology could be a vessel for human connection, not just a tool for commerce. It was a platform for artists, storytellers, and dreamers to share their work, to weave their individual threads into a collective tapestry. It was my heart, made manifest in lines of code. But to my family, it was just my little project. A harmless, if somewhat bewildering, hobby. Their love for me was real, I believed, but it was conditional, filtered through a lens of disappointment. I was the unpolished stone in their meticulously curated collection of jewels, and tonight, at my father's 70th birthday celebration, they were about to make sure I remembered it. The Azure Point Yacht Club was my family's natural habitat. It smelled of old money, teak polish, and the faint, salty tang of the sea. From the moment I stepped out of my modest sedan, a stark contrast to the gleaming luxury vehicles that lined the drive, I felt the familiar tightening in my chest. It was the feeling of being measured and found wanting. I wore a simple, navy blue silk dress. It had cost a small fortune, a quiet indulgence, but its elegance was in its simplicity, a language my family refused to learn. My mother, a vision in pale gold, greeted me at the entrance. Her smile was a masterpiece of social engineering, warm at the edges, but cool at the center. "We've put you on the terrace, dear," she said, her voice a soft, melodic blade. "The main dining room is for, well, you understand." I understood perfectly. I glanced through the grand, arched doorway into the main dining room. The long table was a constellation of familiar faces, all shining brightly. Julian was holding court, his laughter echoing off the crystal glasses. Serafina, draped in a crimson gown that shimmered under the chandeliers, was air-kissing an acquaintance. My father, Arthur, sat at the head of the table, a proud patriarch surveying his kingdom. "Of course, Mom," I replied, my voice softer than I intended. I smoothed the front of my dress, a nervous gesture I thought I'd outgrown. "It's just." She adjusted the triple strand of pearls at her throat, a nervous tick of her own. "With your creative pursuits, we thought you'd be more comfortable out here, away from all the business talk. It can be so dreadfully dull for those not involved." Creative pursuits. That was the latest euphemism for what they perceived as my failure to launch. It sounded gentler than unemployed, but carried the same weight of pity. A wave of laughter spilled out from the dining room. Julian had spotted me. To the terrace dwellers, he called out, raising his champagne flute with a theatrical flourish. May they find inspiration in the salty air. A few people tittered politely. I felt a flush of heat rise in my cheeks, an old, familiar shame. But then, something else surfaced alongside it, a strange sense of calm. A detachment. I was an observer here, not a participant. I had been for a long time. Discreetly, I checked the slim, unassuming phone in my clutch. 2 missed calls from Anya, my COO. A text message glowed on the screen. Kamaribi board is online. They've accepted our final terms. Awaiting your go-ahead to begin the signing protocol. $4.2 billion. A merger that would redefine the landscape of creative technology. A deal I had painstakingly architected over 18 months of sleepless nights and transatlantic calls. And here I was, being sent to the children's table while my family celebrated their own, smaller orbits. My mother led me onto the terrace. It was a beautiful space, but isolated, exposed to the growing evening chill. A single small table was set for one, a lonely island in a sea of empty flagstones. The vast, darkening expanse of the ocean stretched out before me, the rhythmic crash of waves against the seawall a mournful percussion. "Isn't the view lovely?" Mom said, a little too brightly, as if the scenery were adequate compensation for the exclusion. "And Serafina's new jewelry line is being considered by a boutique in Paris. Can you imagine?" I nodded, my mind a world away, picturing the digital signatures flying across secure servers, connecting my quiet company in Port Blossom with Kamaribi Innovations in Kyoto. "That's wonderful for her," I said, my voice genuine. I was not jealous of their successes, only weary of the constant comparison. "And you, darling?" she asked, the question an obligatory afterthought. "How is your website thing?" "It's going well," I said. The same quiet, non-committal answer I'd given for 5 years. Let them think what they wanted. Let them seat me on the terrace. The truth was a seed I had planted in secret, and its roots were now deep and strong, anchored in a soil they couldn't see. Just as my mother turned to rejoin the party, Serafina swept onto the terrace, a flute of champagne in her hand, her crimson dress a slash of color against the twilight. "Oh, Alara, darling," she sighed, her gaze sweeping over my simple dress with theatrical pity. "You must let me take you shopping. This minimalism it's a choice, I suppose. But it doesn't exactly scream success, does it? How do you expect anyone to take you seriously?" I thought of the profile piece scheduled to run in Wired next month. The headline they were considering was, "The Weaver of Etheria, How Alara Vance Quietly Built a $4 billion Haven for Creatives." I doubted the article would mention my dress. "And honestly," she continued, leaning closer, her perfume cloying, "you could at least put on a brave face. Pretend. That's what we all do. Though I suppose it's hard to pretend when there's so little to work with." Her words, once capable of leaving deep, stinging wounds, now felt like pebbles thrown against a fortress wall. They made a sound, but they did no damage. The fortress was my self-respect, built brick by painful brick over years of their casual dismissals. My phone buzzed again. A new text from Anya. "Final document packet is ready. The courier is on approach. ETA 20 minutes. I texted back a simple "proceed," my fingers steady. Inside, my father was on his feet, his voice resonant with pride as Julian outlined a new luxury condo development. "Now that," Dad declared, raising his glass, "is how you build a legacy. To tangible assets. To real success." The toast echoed through the room. A chorus of "to real success" followed. I watched them through the glass, a silent film of self-congratulation. They never saw me. Not really. Not my dual degrees in computer science and fine art. Not the quiet way I'd leveraged my inheritance into a thriving startup. Not the silent, tireless work that was about to change everything. "Alara," my father's voice cut through the air, carrying that familiar cadence of loving disappointment. He stood in the doorway, gesturing vaguely in my direction. "Are you sure you won't come in? Julian is about to explain the financing structure. It might be good for you to hear how a real business operates." The family business. A legacy built on solid ground, but one whose foundations were now cracking under the weight of Julian's ambition and mismanagement. The same firm whose largest outstanding commercial mortgage I had quietly acquired through a subsidiary of Etheria 3 months ago, a move made not out of malice, but to protect my father's life's work from his own son's hubris. They would find out soon enough. "I'm all right out here, Dad," I replied, my gaze returning to the horizon. The sea was calm tonight, its surface a dark, shimmering silk. "The view is quite inspiring." "Suit yourself," Julian shrugged from his seat, basking in our father's approval. "We're projecting a $90 million valuation on this project alone. Of course, that kind of work requires a certain grit, a real-world acumen that isn't for everyone." I heard it then. A low, rhythmic thrumming in the distance, a sound that didn't belong to the gentle lapping of the waves or the polite chatter of the party. It grew steadily louder, a purposeful beat against the evening sky. "What is that noise?" Serafina asked, frowning, her perfectly painted brow furrowing. The sound swelled, resolving into the distinct whir of helicopter blades. A sleek, dark gray helicopter, its navigation lights blinking like captured stars, was making a steady, deliberate approach. On its side, subtle but clear in the twilight, was the Etheria logo, a stylized dandelion seed caught on a breath of wind. "Who on earth?" my mother began, her voice trailing off as the helicopter bypassed the distant helipad and began a slow, careful descent toward the expansive lawn just beyond the terrace. The manicured hedges trembled in the downdraft. Through the glass, I saw the party grind to a halt. Champagne flutes paused midair. Conversations died. All eyes turned from the spectacle of Julian's success to the far more compelling spectacle outside. This was not part of the carefully orchestrated evening. This was an intrusion. A disruption of their perfectly ordered world. The helicopter's skids touched the grass with barely a whisper. The blades began to slow. A side door slid open and a man in a sharp, dark suit emerged, followed by a woman carrying a reinforced briefcase. They moved with an unhurried efficiency that spoke of high stakes and absolute professionalism. I recognized the man as Marcus Thorne, my head of security, a calm and capable former intelligence officer. He spotted me on the terrace and walked towards me, his steps measured on the flagstones. The guests inside pressed against the glass doors, their faces a mixture of annoyance, curiosity, and a dawning, fearful confusion. Marcus stopped a respectful few feet away. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice low and clear, cutting through the slowing whir of the blades. "Anya sends her apologies for the intrusion. The situation is time-sensitive. The Kamaribi board is waiting." "Thank you, Marcus," I replied, my voice steady as I rose from my lonely table. "Are the final papers here?" The woman with the briefcase stepped forward. "Yes, ma'am. The full merger agreement. 4.2 billion, pending your final signature. The markets in Tokyo open in less than 3 hours." A sharp gasp, followed by the distinct sound of shattering glass, came from the dining room. I glanced over. Julian had dropped his champagne flute. The red wine spread across the white tablecloth like a wound. His face, usually so ruddy with confidence, was as pale as the linen. 4 billion? My mother whispered, her hand flying to her pearls, not as an accessory, but as an anchor. My father pushed through the glass doors onto the terrace, his authority, for the first time in my life, seeming fragile. "Alara," he said, his voice strained. "What exactly is going on?" I offered him a small, sad smile. I took out my phone and turned the screen towards him. It displayed the pre-written press release, set to go live the moment my signature dried. Etheria and Kamaribi Innovations announce historic $4.2 billion merger, creating a new global leader in creative technology. Founder and CEO Alara Vance to lead the combined entity. "Just some business that needed my attention," I said, my voice gentle. I watched Serafina take an unsteady step back, her crimson dress suddenly looking like a costume for a part she no longer knew how to play. "You know, my little website thing that you never thought to ask about. But you can't be." Julian stammered, his $90 million project suddenly shrinking into insignificance. "You're not the CEO." "The founder and CEO of Etheria," I confirmed, letting the words hang in the cool night air. "The same Etheria that has become the dominant platform for independent artists in North America and Europe? The one that is about to merge with Japan's most revered creative software firm." I paused, letting the reality of it settle over them. The one whose investment arm, as a gesture of goodwill, secured the primary mortgage on Vance Holdings' flagship downtown property 6 weeks ago to prevent it from defaulting? The silence that fell on the terrace was profound. It was a silence filled with the wreckage of years of assumptions. The only sound was the gentle, patient hum of the idling helicopter. "You bought the mortgage?" My father's voice was a choked whisper. Julian's expansion plans were too aggressive, I explained softly, without malice. He overleveraged. The bank was preparing to call in the loan. "I couldn't stand by and watch your legacy crumble because of his pride." I looked at my brother, whose face was a mask of disbelief and humiliation. "Real-world acumen, as you said, isn't for everyone." Serafina found her voice first, a plaintive, wounded sound. Why, Alara? Why didn't you tell us? The question, so simple and yet so complex, hung between us. Tell you? I asked, a genuine sadness in my tone. It wasn't a rhetorical question meant to wound. It was a real one. When Julian advised his friends in venture capital that my little art project was a bad investment. When Mom explained to the charity board that I was finding my own way at a slower pace. When Dad told me that a true legacy is something you can touch, something made of steel and glass, not digital ephemera. My phone buzzed in my hand, a gentle reminder from Anya. The world was moving on, even if we were frozen in this moment. Ms. Vance, Marcus reminded me, his tone deferential but firm. The board. Of course. I picked up my simple clutch, the one Serafina had pitted hours ago. Dad, I said, turning to him. I'm so sorry, but I have to leave your birthday celebration. A $4 billion merger waits for no one, not even for the family disappointment who was seated on the terrace. Wait, my mother cried out, her social instincts overriding her shock. She rushed forward, her face a mess of conflicting emotions. Perhaps we should go inside. We can rearrange the seating. The head of the table, it's only right. Arthur, we can move Julian. Now, I asked, my voice still quiet, but imbued with a new, solid weight. Now you want me at the head of the table? After years of being the footnote in the family Christmas letter? After being relegated to the terrace because my life's work might bore your guests? After being treated like a fragile, lost thing because I didn't measure my success with the same yardstick as you? Julian stepped forward, the dealmaker mask sliding awkwardly back into place. Alara, sis, we should talk. We should explore the synergies here, between our companies. You mean my company and the company whose finances you nearly ruined? I asked, not unkindly. The one I now hold the controlling debt for? That business. I gave Marcus a nod. He and the courier led the way towards the helicopter. I took a few steps, then paused and looked back at my family, clustered together on the edge of the terrace, like shipwreck survivors on a rocky outcrop. They looked smaller, somehow. The grand architecture of the club, the vastness of the sea, the boundless night sky, it all seemed to dwarf them. I have to go, I said. I have people counting on me. A team that believed in me when no one else did. I have a responsibility to them. I walked across the damp lawn, the downdraft of the blades whipping my hair and dress around me. As I stepped up into the cabin, the interior warm and smelling of leather, I took one last look back. They were still there, 3 figures silhouetted against the bright lights of the party they had been so proud of, a party that now seemed utterly irrelevant. As the helicopter lifted off, the Azure Point Yacht Club shrinking below, I didn't feel a surge of triumph or a desire for revenge. I felt a profound and aching sense of release. The borrowed coat I had worn for so long had finally slipped from my shoulders, and for the first time, I felt the warmth of my own skin. I was not the family failure. I was not the disappointment on the terrace. I was Alara Vance, and I was flying into a world of my own making. The days that followed were a quiet storm. My phone, usually so silent, became a constant source of buzzing, a chorus of voices from a life I had just left behind. Julian, we need a proper strategy session. I've drafted a proposal for integrating our portfolios. Serious potential here. Serafina, darling, that wired piece is coming out? We must find you something stunning to wear. I have connections at Chanel. Call me. My mother. The ladies at the club are simply beside themselves. The Chamber of Commerce wants to give you the key to the city. We must plan a proper gala in your honor. And my father a single, unadorned text, Alara. We need to talk. I read each message not with anger or satisfaction, but with a kind of anthropological curiosity. It was as if I were studying the belated communications of a lost tribe that had just discovered fire. I forwarded them all to Anya with a simple instruction. Please have my executive assistant schedule introductory calls for next quarter. For now, I need some space. The news broke, not with a bang, but with the quiet, inexorable force of a tide turning. The silent architect, Alara Vance's Etheria merges with Kamaribi in landmark deal. From Port Blossom to global stage, how one woman's vision for softer tech created a multi-billion-dollar powerhouse. I read the articles from the window seat of my apartment, a quiet, minimalist space overlooking the same ocean I had stared at from the terrace. The view was different from here. Higher, calmer. I wasn't at the mercy of the waves. I was watching them from a safe harbor of my own design. My home wasn't a penthouse palace designed to impress. It was a sanctuary filled with light, books, and the art of the creators I had championed on my platform. It was a space that reflected not my net worth, but my inner world. My assistant's voice came softly through the intercom a week later. "Miss Vance, your sister is in the lobby. She says it's urgent. She's brought a gift." I smiled faintly. Let me guess. A ridiculously expensive handbag that she once told me was something one earns the right to carry. A Birkin, to be precise, my assistant confirmed, a hint of amusement in her voice. Shall I send her up? I looked at my calendar. I had a video conference with a group of young women entrepreneurs I was mentoring, a call that was infinitely more important to me than any handbag. "No, thank you, Chloe," I said. "Please offer her a coffee and tell her I'm unavailable. And give her one of my cards." I pictured Serafina, her perfect manicure tracing the simple, elegant letters, Alara Vance, founder and CEO. Etheria. No boasting, just a statement of fact. A fact that had existed for years, hidden in plain sight. Later that afternoon, my father called. I let it go to voicemail, but he called again immediately. I hesitated, then answered, putting the call on speaker as I watered the small bonsai tree on my windowsill. "Alara," he began, his voice lacking its usual booming certainty. It was quieter, more tentative. We. I feel we've made a grave miscalculation." "Which one?" I asked, my voice even. I wasn't trying to be cruel, just honest. "The one where you assumed my work had no value because it wasn't built of concrete? Or the one where you fostered a family culture that measured love in stock prices and square footage?" There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear his breathing, the slow, heavy sound of a man confronting a reality he had long ignored. "I was wrong," he finally said. The words sounded foreign on his tongue, as if he'd had to learn them in a new language. "I thought I was protecting you. I thought the world was a harsh, unforgiving place, and I wanted you to have something solid, something tangible to hold on to." "I do have something solid, Dad," I replied, looking around my quiet apartment, at the light streaming through the window, at the thriving green of the little tree in my hands. "I built it myself. You were all so busy looking for it in the places you understood, in bank vaults and boardrooms, that you never thought to look for it in me. What you have built." He started, then trailed off. "It's beyond my comprehension. But I see the result. The world sees it. I am proud." The word, one I had craved for so long, landed softly. It didn't trigger the explosion of joy I once would have expected. Instead, it felt like a single, late drop of rain on ground that had already been watered. It was welcome, but no longer desperately needed. "Thank you, Dad," I said. "That means something to me." "It does. But I'm not the same person who was hoping to hear that." "Your mother is planning a dinner," he said, a hopeful note creeping into his voice. "Just family. At the house. She wants to make things right." "I can't," I said gently. "I'm flying to Kyoto tomorrow. But please, go ahead without me. Enjoy yourselves. Talk about Julian's development plans. I'm sure they'll sound very impressive." I didn't add, from any seat at the table. It didn't need to be said. Before I hung up, I added one more thing. "Dad, the mortgage on the Vance building. I'm restructuring the debt. I'm giving the company more favorable terms. I don't want the family legacy to fail. I just wanted to be honest about what it is. The greatest gift my family ever gave me was the space they created with their disapproval. In that quiet, lonely space, I was free. Free from their expectations, free from their definitions of success, free to build a world based on my own values. While they were performing success for an audience of their peers, I was quietly achieving it. A month later, a thick, cream-colored envelope arrived by courier. It was an invitation to the Port Blossom Founders Day Gala. My name was at the top of the honoree list. Tucked inside was a handwritten note from my father on his personal stationery. "Alara," it read. "I am beginning to understand that a legacy isn't something you build, but something you grow. It needs light and air, not just steel and stone. I hope, in time, you'll let us be part of your world again. Not because of what you've achieved, but because you are my daughter." I held the note for a long time, the simple, heartfelt words doing more to heal the old wounds than any grand gesture could have. The reconciliation wouldn't be instantaneous. Trust, once broken, is like a delicate ceramic. It can be mended, but the cracks will always be part of its history. I wouldn't be attending the gala. I was launching a new educational foundation funded by the merger, and my time was better spent there. But for the first time, I thought about the future. I pictured a different kind of family dinner. Not a performance, but a gathering. Quieter. More honest. Maybe on a terrace, not out of exile, but by choice, so we could all watch the sun set over the ocean together. The path to self-respect is often a solitary one. You walk it alone, learning to provide your own warmth, to navigate by your own stars. But if you walk it long enough, you sometimes find that it leads you back to others, not because you need them to validate your journey, but because you are finally strong enough to invite them to walk alongside you in a world where everyone has a place at the table. And in the quiet space they had unknowingly given me, the girl on the terrace had learned not just to build an empire, but to build a world of her own.